Welcome to the God-Centered Podcast. This is the place for consistent God-centered, God-honoring, and God-glorifying biblical content. Now, let's join Andy Kane for today's episode.
Hello and welcome to another God-Centered Conversation. This is Andy Kane. It's a joy to be with you once again. We've already had our conversation with Kyle Kirby about church history, and today we are going to do a God-centered conversation about pastoral ministry. And I could think of no one better to come and do that conversation with me than my pastor. So I have Pastor Jay with me. He is officially known as Dr. R.J. Waggoner, but I call him Pastor Jay, and he's a wonderful friend of mine. Pastor Jay, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Andy. And you can call me Pastor all day long and forget the rest of it. That'll be fine. But you can just call me Jay. We're friends. I'm glad to be here. Enjoy.
I can assure you, he's earned the title. He's put in the work. He did the education. He's earned it. But yes, he's right. He's Pastor Jay, and he is certainly the Paul to my Timothy. And I look forward one day to the opportunity to be someone else's Paul to their Timothy. And so I wanted to have him on. All right. Well, we don't waste a lot of time here. We jump right in. So what I want you to understand as an audience is that we're just going to kind of take a survey of the ministerial career, for lack of a better term. We don't look at it necessarily as a career. We look at it as a role and a calling, but sort of the things. Jay has had a very unique insight, I think, that many may not have had before him, because he's been able to see technology shift in a large scale over his tenure. And he's also seen many other things not related to technology change. So we're just going to start from the beginning. Pastor Jay, if you could share with us a little about your life and when you became a Christian, sort of the story behind that.
Well, I was born in 1953. That's a long time ago. So I grew up, mainly my memories are the 1960s. Pretty turbulent time here in America. But I was raised in a very small town of about 300 population in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, in between the Ohio River and the higher mountains. And I'm grateful because my parents took me to church at a young age. And in particular, my mother made sure that I was in church on Sunday along with my brothers. And she was very concerned about my salvation. And I really, from a human perspective, owe my salvation to my mother. She prayed for me. And when I got up to about the age of 6, 7, 8, she took me to every revival in the county. I mean, one after another, it seems like, and made sure that I heard the word. And I think I really was saved before all that transpired, but I just didn't really fully comprehend it. I made a public profession of faith in a church service when I was maybe 7 or 8, and like I said, I think I was saved before that, because I prayed and asked the Lord to save me, but I didn't have any assurance of my salvation in those days. And from the outset, I don't remember this. My mother said from the very outset, when I was first saved, I made the statement that I was going to be a preacher, and I don't remember saying that as I grew older and got into my teen years and high school years. I didn't really walk close with the Lord. That came about after I was about 20 years of age, in my college years, and I realized that I was not going the right path. I had made other things my priority, and God had just kind of taken all those things that I thought I wanted to do with my life, kind of took it all out of the picture. So it was then, and in response to a campus fellowship that I attended, not a good brothers there, sisters, that I got back into the Word of God, started reading it for the first time, and all the rest. And at that point, God just got a hold of my life. And the time I graduated college, I wasn't going to go into what I studied for. I went on to seminary. So,
Okay. Well, we certainly, I know with mine, the typical, which you've actually have done sermons on this about, the percentage of people that are saved and when they're saved. And I was probably your prototypical saved at a young age and things like that. And so that's very insightful there. Well, from there, what did the journey into pastoral ministry look like? Everybody has that story as well. What did that journey look like?
well, I did not have any life-changing experience in some particular church service or during some moment in my life. But when I did begin to read the Bible and go to Bible studies and fellowship with other believers, and I really committed my life to the Lord. In fact, I was laying on my bed in my dorm room one night, and I remember saying to the Lord, I've tried to, do what I wanted to do and what I thought I should do, and this isn't working. This is a mess, and so I'm gonna follow what you want me to do at this point. Now, I didn't know what that meant. As the more I got active in the Christian fellowship there, I had opportunity one time to teach a group of students, fellow students, on a particular Bible subject, and I found I just loved it. And this is kind of strange because I never thought about being a teacher or a preacher at that point. And then this is very unique experience. My senior year, that was my junior year, I think it was. Uh, there was a local church that invited our Christian fellowship. It was InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, was the name of it, and the overall organization. They invited our group on our campus at Marietta College, Marietta, Ohio, to send over 3 speakers for their morning service. They wanted 3 students to get up and give a testimony or talk about whatever they wanted to, 3 in a row. And lo and behold, the president of the group chose me to be one of them. And that normally at that point in my life would have scared me to death. I mean, I hated to get up in front of people. I hated speech class. I had no ambition to be a public speaker. It was just always a horrifying experience for me. But when I was asked, I thought, yeah, I'd like to do that. And I don't know why. I think it was just the Holy Spirit and the gifts that He had given me, and I didn't even realize. So I thought, boy, this is going to be really tough. It's going to be tough. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm gonna go ahead anyway. And unbelievably, I walked up in front of the church that morning. I was about the second or third one to speak. I'm not sure which. I walked up there and I was at perfect peace. There was no stage fright, no jitters. No, I'm not sure I had a whole lot of anything profound to say, but I realized something had changed in my life. Looking back on it, I believe it was just simply the spiritual gift that God had installed in my life has become operative, which is, as I see it, the gift of teaching. And so it was just a natural thing then. Every time I had a chance to teach a class, I ended up teaching junior high class at a church. I got invited to all those little churches my mother used to take me to revival to, would invite me to come and preach. And again, I didn't know really what I was doing, but I was doing that before I graduated from college. So it was just a natural step at that point. I just realized this is what God had for me. And I went from there on into seminary.
Okay. Well, do you think there's any challenges that you might have faced getting into ministry or maybe getting into your first church that might be different than what maybe even I faced or what some may face today? Or do you think that principle still holds true that one of the things you talk about in your book about gifted to serve is that specifically with pastors is that, and in fact, I think you did this with your there was a series you did on uh, expository preaching simplified and how a man's gift makes room for him. Do you think that principle would apply even to today's world with the challenges we have today?
I think so. I mean, I know so. It's as Solomon once said, "There's nothing new under the sun." Okay, people are people, ministry is ministry. Yeah, there's certain things in the culture that changes you have to adapt to, and the particular situation. Like when I was pastoring in Appalachia, my first 9 years was in West Virginia, where I grew up. I'm very familiar with that culture, and I did not really have any challenges in that regard. But when I moved to North Carolina, it was like going to a foreign country. So you always have to adapt to those things.
Yeah, now it's home for you.
But the basics are always people. Now I'm not saying that in terms of just my congregation, but sometimes the challenge is yourself. Uh, but it's all because of our human side, our fallen nature, and all the rest. So overcoming those things, uh, that's always a big challenge. I was not prepared in seminary for what I was going to face in my first church, a little rural church, a little community of about 2,000 in the hills of West Virginia. Um, I went in and you would have thought those people thought I could walk on water. You know, I could do no wrong for about a year, maybe a year and a half. And then it was like somebody just flipped a switch and everybody was themselves again. You know, we call that the honeymoon period. So uh,
Mm-hmm.
I was
Yep.
like, what did I do? What did I do to evoke this? Is it my fault? You know, uh, it's just what you go through. People will be on their best behavior for a while for the new pastor, but then they become, they revert to their regular ways, and people are a challenge in many, many ways.
Well, I can remember at my first church, and I remember calling you early on and thinking, like, "Where's my honeymoon period? I don't think I ever got one."
Well,
Well, y-
I
sometimes
remember
it
those days,
happens.
and I'm not sure you did either.
Well, I do have the recording of my first sermon, and in that recording, you start out and you say it's been a long time, but you think that you can vaguely remember your first sermon. Do you remember your first sermon?
I
Or do you think it
remember,
was that time where you had the three people go and speak and then you got to speak? Do you consider that to
well,
be it?
that would be it, but it wasn't really a sermon. The first time I actually was invited to come and do a sermon at a church service was an evening service at a local church in a little town I lived in. And I do remember it because I had no idea what to do, how to speak, where to, so I just took something that was on my mind. Actually, it was a topic of Genesis, I think, and I spoke about evolution or something along those lines. And looking back on it, I was like a lot of young preachers starting out. I was pretty stern, pretty serious, and probably a little bit too strong in some ways uh, in trying to communicate with people. But yeah, I remember it. I don't remember it as a good sermon, but I remember the experience.
Mine was I still have some people occasionally that will mention it, and it was bad. But I mean, that to me though, that kind of brings me to my next question. See, I had you, and you've always said you've got to just get up there and do it. In your early years, either leading up to or even in your first church, was there somebody like you that I had that you had for yourself? Were you able to experience that?
Unfortunately, no, I did not. I mentioned I was in a very rural area. There wasn't other Baptist churches of like mind around me. I remember calling a pastor or two a couple of times when I had some problems and asked their advice, but never really had anybody that was there on a regular basis to give me some perspective. So I learned a lot of things basically by making mistakes. You know, that's probably how we learn best.
Yeah.
I've learned over the years that I may have been better served to have went in as an associate pastor somewhere and learned something under somebody else. But all my friends that were graduating from seminary, that's what they did or wanted to do. I don't know if they all accomplished it, but I had such a passion to preach. I just couldn't face the fact of going in and being an associate and preaching a few times a year. I give me a smaller church, and let me do it every week, and I think God used that in my life. I learned on the
Yeah.
fly, but I had really good training in seminary, so had all the tools. I just had to put them together.
Well, before we shift to North Carolina and to where you spent the bulk of your pastoral ministry, when you look back on it now, I know you had I think it was 9 years in Spencer in West Virginia. Are you able to kind of see some joy? I know there's challenges, but from a positive perspective, what would you say are some of the joys that you carry with you even to today, thinking back on that first experience?
Well, certain people come to mind who were some were just a blessing, in our lives. My wife and uh, our daughter was born the first year I was in the church. A lot of fond memories of people that treated us well and all the rest. And then there were those that were a challenge that I saw in 9 years, make a huge change. And to experience that and see that in people, that's often the blessing I think about more than anything else. I remember I had a deacon that was on my deacon board, and he's just one of these guys. He just said what he said. He was right in your face. He didn't temper anything he had to say. Um, and anytime I'd bring up something in a deacon meeting about, well, I think maybe that we need as a church to do this or that, he'd always be the first one to speak, and everybody would just look to him, and it didn't matter what I said at that point, because whatever he said, the other guys were for. So uh, he was a real challenge, and he was a church treasurer. That didn't help either. But uh, somewhere after a few years, he had a son that needed to go to a VA hospital about 75 miles away and had no way of getting there. So I said, well, I'll drive him down. So I drove him down to the VA hospital. That guy's whole demeanor, his whole person just changed in terms of me just because of that. I did that. I didn't think anything about it. After that, he's my best friend. I mean, don't say anything about the pastor. That guy was, it's on my side. So, uh, I don't know. Remember that he's not. There's others of similar nature. That's just the one that pops in my mind. You see people, and I didn't understand it then, but people are hesitant to follow somebody. I was 27 years old. He was like 60. You know, uh,
Yeah.
he had a way more life experience than I did, and most everybody else in the church, certainly all the men that were part of leadership did. So, and
Oh
now I
yeah.
look back and I think, gee whiz, would I be that willing to just wholesale follow somebody that's 27 years old as my pastor today? So
Yep. Well, from there you did transition to North Carolina. Before we kind of get into sort of the history of what you did while you were there, just kind of talk to me about what did the process look like of coming here? Because, you know, for me, I haven't really had a lot of moving, relocating. I know some people that have done some major relocations. West Virginia to North Carolina is not the same as New York to California, but there's still relocation there. So was it something that you had considered or thought about, or was it something that came to you and you had to come to the position of being willing to move? Was it just one of those things where God made it clear? How did that sort of play out for you?
well, I was looking to make a move. I felt like I'd accomplished all I could do where I was at. Looking back on it, I mean, if I'd have been older, I would have stayed there longer. But 9 years is a pretty good tenure. That was about the longest tenure in that church. Uh, the day I think the pastor preceded me was there 9 years, and after that, I don't think anybody's made it 9 years since. So, uh, but I was very concerned about getting to a place where my daughter didn't have to go to the public school that we had there. That's part of it. Uh, I had an opportunity to go to Akron, Ohio, and area. I say an opportunity, at least they were considered me, but the Lord just kind of shut my mind and heart to that, and I never went there. And I don't even remember how I got somebody here in North Carolina got my name or I contacted them. Don't remember, but anyway, I was invited to come down and be associate pastor of a church plant in Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina. And I spent 1 year there. The pastor had indicated he was going to move out and start another plant and needed somebody to take over, but ultimately he did not do that. He stayed, and that kind of put me in a position where I had come at a big cut in my salary, even though I didn't have a big salary at all in West Virginia, but that was cut at least in half, maybe more, because it was a small church plant. And so at that point, if I wasn't going to become the pastor right away, I mean, financially, we obviously were forced into doing something else. So I did that. I ended up being an interim pastor church in Raleigh for about 7 months. But before that, we just started attending a local Baptist church, independent Baptist church. I did not know at the time we did that the pastor was planning on retiring. He was about 65, and he retired while I was still going there when I could, but I was mainly the interim pastor at this other church. And the public committee came up and heard me preach, and you know, uh, basically that's how it all transpired. They kind of knew me. Churches kind of tend to take people they know versus somebody they don't know at all. Just human nature, I guess. So because I was attending there and I'd preached for the pastor there a time or two, it was kind of natural for them, I think, to look at me.
Okay. Well, with fellowship specifically, you how many years did you end up being there before you retired?
I was in my 30th year, closer to the end of my 30th year, maybe 29 and a half or three quarters, something like that.
Okay.
Um, so virtually 30 years.
What would you say in that tenure there? Of course, I mean, there's a lot that would change over 30 years, but are there specific moments in time that stand out to you, as blessings? And then, on the challenges side, as much as you can share, because I know a lot of these things are, private, but, were there's some challenges and joys that kind of stick out to you over that 30 years there?
Well, my greatest joy was just preaching the word of God to the people and seeing people's lives changed and impacted. People made professions of faith. Some of these people, I still go out and eat breakfast with some of the guys, that I baptized, all the rest. That's just a huge blessing. My my biggest challenge personally was, uh, you know, it's a lot more populated now than it was when I started in 1992. But it was at the beginning where those people were starting to move into North Carolina, move into this area, and had great opportunity. And the church grew very rapidly in my first year or two. And that basically that ended up being the apex of the attendance. So I mean, we got up around 300, and we never were able to get back up there because of some other things I'll share with you in a moment. But so, and I had a lot of challenges with conflict, and basically pastors that have conflict in their congregation have to realize it's not their fault. Now, it can be, but generally speaking, it's not their fault. Because all the conflicts, all the problems that pastors have probably could pretty much be rolled under one umbrella, and it's called control. Who's going to be in control? And that came from the people at first, because they had a pastor for 30 years and I was different. I had different
Yep.
personality, different approach, everything. And so it was hard to overcome that. But I had enough sense at that point to know that all I had to do was just do my job and stay with it. So at about the 10-year mark, I finally felt like I could, accomplish something. Um, but it's probably more like 15 years before I really felt like I didn't have people in the church, a good segment of the church that just were not on board. By the time I've often said to people, when I first came, I would say, I think the Lord would have us do this, and people would say, why? And after I was there 20 years, I'd say, I think the Lord would like to have us do this, and people would say, how do we do it? That's the difference. And
Yep.
I don't know, I don't know what the years, I don't know how it plays out in every church. I think some churches are more willing to do that quicker. And again, and I followed someone who's there 30 years. That just makes it much more difficult. But I was there 30 years. Now the new guys got the same problem I have, probably to some extent. That's just human nature too. But my biggest
Yeah.
struggle, I hate to say this, Andy, my greatest challenges and my most discouraging problems came from staff members. In some cases, they were just young and they weren't too smart. They did things that caused problems. I mean, in my first church, I did too. When we're all young, we do those things.
Yeah.
But the ones that really upset me were those that knew what they were doing, and they basically, it was a control issue. They were not happy being on the staff and doing what I told them to do. And not that I was a dictator, I would, but at some point you have to tell somebody they're doing the job or they're not, or whatever. I had at least two that tried to basically push me out or split the church. The first one cost me about 60, 70 members when he left. The
Hmm.
second one cost me over 100 when he left. Not all at once, but so those are the things that really hurt. Uh, when a church goes through that, it's hard to recover from it. You kind of get
Yeah.
that feeling that people go more standoff as far as getting involved there. And again, from my perspective, it wasn't my fault. But I can tell you this: I didn't handle it right entirely in either case. And who does in those situations? Sometimes you just have to do what's right, even when half the church is going to think you're doing it wrong, and you got to look yourself in the mirror in the end. And
Well,
you
I
know,
know for me specifically, when I was in Emporia, the 2.5 years when I started, you and I had a lot of conversations when I was there because I was going through this for the first time. But now looking back, I think mine might have looked a little different than yours, but I think the principle's the same. I think it weren't so much that I was putting my foot down, but I was just things that I thought were important really were not that important. And I think that's a learning curve for pastors. You have to realize that sometimes you had told me this one time where you said, if somebody comes to you and it's a really big deal to them, you want to listen to them and help them, feel heard, but you may not do anything about it because it's really not that big of a deal. So learning to let things go was a hard learning curve for me.
yeah. Well, it's like I said, I, 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 I look back on those days and think, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do this? Why did I do that? But second guessing ourselves isn't going to help anybody. We just have to learn from it. But the bottom line is, some things are written in the Word, and you got to stand by it.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Well, just we're going to get into things like, technology and preaching and kind of be moving up the timeline here. But if we were to just take just pastoral ministry, the ins and outs of just being a pastor, And if the Pastor Jay from right there, I think you've retired from full time ministry. It's been what, 4, was it 2021?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So, the Pastor Jay of his last 5 years or so in full time ministry that had benefited from all that history and learning. We always say, if we go back and tell ourselves something, what are some of the things that stand out in your mind? If you go back to the Pastor Jay of the 80s, the 90s, or maybe even the early 2000s, what are some of the things you'd want to tell him?
Well, the first thing I'd tell him is be patient and let God sort it out and be faithful in the process. I think our biggest temptation is we get either discouraged, uh, distressed, angered, frustrated, and that cannot help but come out in your life. And some people see it, some don't, but it's not helpful. Um, I guess my greatest lesson over the years is just, you know, sometimes I responded and I responded for the right reasons, but I could have been more patient. I could have been more loving. Uh, when someone pushes you so far and they know they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, but they're going to do it because that's what they want to do. It's hard for me to to be uh, overlook that. So, but I finished my ministry when I retired. I thought I was a failure. Emotionally, I felt that way
Hmm.
because the church never was able to recover to the extent that I was hoping after going through those things. But during my retirement years so far, it's been 4 years so far. What I've learned is, if you're just preaching the word every week and you're faithful to that, that's success. It's not all these other things that we think have to happen, because that's what God uses to change lives. And that's what I tell young
That is,
pastors right now.
well, I was going to say that's definitely one thing that's changed in me from where I started to where I'm at now. Because I was just with a group last night at a church that is looking like I might end up being the interim at, and I did Wednesday night for them, and I talked about where you've been, where you're at, where you're going, and I told them every step of the way. I said, I know it sounds counter to everything everybody will tell you, but biblical faithfulness is the foundation of everything. If you're biblically faithful, everything else will take care of itself. And, I would encourage you to always remember that, attendance or whatever those measurements that we like to put on churches, even if
Yeah.
it didn't recover to whatever you thought it should have been or what it could have been, you got people like me out here that benefited greatly.
Well, that's the one thing. The other thing that's just a great joy to me is someone like yourself, Andy, that just to know maybe I had some little part in helping you. And there's some other guys that fall into that category too. I could give you a list of them. It's not really long, but I there's that's what we're doing, developing people, edifying people, helping them to find their place in the ministry, whether it's in a pastoral ministry or something else. That does bring you joy. It takes time. It takes time to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, let's shift to the topic of preaching specifically. I grew up around a certain kind of preaching. People tend to think of preaching in terms of what they're used to, and you've got all kinds of personalities and styles and ways to go about it. There's two things I want to kind of talk about here with preaching. First, how have you seen preaching your preaching specifically evolve from going all the way back to West Virginia to fellowship to later years in fellowship to even now what you're doing now? And based on how you've learned and grown, what is some of the basic advice you'd give to a young preacher if he's coming along?
Well, young preachers, including myself, need to take themselves a little too seriously. And we think everything hinges on the sermon we're preaching on Sunday morning that week. And I had this influence, and probably a little bit about what you're talking about, where, the preacher is supposed to come in and preach so that everybody feels so convicted that, they fall on their knees and come up to the front in tears and rededicate their life. That's not reality, and it's not our place biblically. I mean, that'll happen, and we should call sin sin, and we have to deal with sin, obviously, when we preach. Uh, but it's not our job to be the Holy Spirit and try to twist arms and convict people and overpower people with our preaching. I was a lot louder. I was a lot more forceful and serious early on, and it's just, I think there's something that's kind of the general progression. Now I can say the same things and not have to put that burden on myself to see the results of it. I can be more relaxed. I can be more of a teacher than the old concept of a preacher. Although I think preaching and teaching, I can't even separate them in my mind or biblically. But I've learned over the years, if you teach the word, and if you really deal with the word and you help people understand the word, most of God's people are going to respond. They don't have to have somebody beat them over the head, so to speak. The word of God does a good job of that, and the Holy Spirit does a good job of it. If I make clear what the word says. I don't know. I'm not sure what the question was, Andy. I'm getting old, so I think I'm hitting around it.
Well, I didn't want to linger here too long because I will have in the description for this video the link to that full series you do on expository preaching. So if somebody's interested in your advice on the nuts and bolts of things, certainly they can look at that. But the reason I wanted to stop here and make sure we cover this, because there's two things that come to my mind when it comes to preaching that you've told me over the years. The first one was, I remember you telling me that of all the young pastors you worked with, that I got the distinction of being the first one that you actually had to tell them that you can calm down a little bit. You don't have to be so excited.
Well, see, I've
And
been
you
around long enough to know to tell you that.
yeah, because you had
And,
said most of them, they're real timid. You have to kind of bring it out of them. Me, it was the other way around. Like, whoa,
right.
come bring it in.
And that's
I can tell
refreshing.
you, yes. And I think I've gotten to that place now where
It is refreshing because, like you say, most
yeah,
people start out very timid and
yep, exactly. Um, and the other thing is, you had told me several times that, because you were saying this, don't think that you have to be the person that causes something. It's the Spirit that does that. And you always tell me, if you get up there and you think it's the best sermon you've ever preached, those people are lucky to have me. And it turns out it does nothing for nobody. And then you'll have the sermons where you think they should fire me today. And then everybody on the way out the door is like, oh, that was your best sermon. And I've experienced that. And I'm like, he was right. He was right.
it happens because that's the God working through it, and the Spirit of God, and it humbles us when we see that. But it also, I think, encourages us too.
Yep. Well, I want to look at the pastor's life. I was going to touch on church health, but I just want to move into pastor's life because I think this is an important place to look. And for me, with as much that I watch online, it's in a sense, it's kind of unfair because if you're online and you're prominent, your story is going to be told quicker. But I know this happens in pastors' lives that maybe aren't so prominent. But we've had a lot in the last year. There've been a lot of pastors that have fallen due to sin and other circumstances, everything from sexual sin to embezzlement, just any number of things. What are some things that you would tell young pastors and I'm thinking in a must and ought, you should. What are some things, one, two, or three things that you would say if you're a young preacher, you must make sure your family life looks like this?
Well, that's very important. And balance is hard to maintain between ministry and family. And some people will say, well, God comes first. Other people say, well, your family has to come first. God doesn't say it that way. God's at the center of our life. And if we're serving Him and dedicated to Him and faithful to Him, then our family life is going to look right. It's not a matter of choosing one over the other. So at the same time, I think as a young pastor, my tendency was to do too much. And then as I matured a little bit in the ministry, my problem was to do a little too much. And by the time I got to the end, I would say the same thing. I wish I would have spent more time with my family. And I thought I was pretty balanced, but there was times I should have said no more often because there's a lot of demands on you. And I wish I would have been more willing to say, no, I can't do that. I did learn over the years, though, don't tell anybody why you can't do something, because as soon as you say, I can't do that because I got to stay home and help my kid with their homework, they're going to have 5 excuses why you know, I learned just to tell people I've got another engagement, even if it's
Another
family,
commitment.
another appointment, another commitment. Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
I've not only employed that in pastoral ministry, but just in my work as well, and just in friendships, because even friendships, sometimes they'll think you should do X, Y, Z. And I just, I have another commitment. And like, well, what's the commitment? The commitment could mean anything from mowing the grass to eating dinner with your wife. It really doesn't matter. The commitment is not their business. It's I'm otherwise committed. And some people may see that as harsh, but it's really not. It's about having a proper, healthy boundary in place that says, this is a special time that I've committed this to, and this is where I'm going to be.
yeah. The other thing I would say in terms of family relationships is we as husbands need to do what the scripture says, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. And oftentimes the wife is the one that's shortchanged because of ministry pressures and obligations. Uh, and that's so critical. If you loved your wife to the extent that Christ loved the church, sacrificially, agape love, uh, that would take care of a lot of temptations and problems and conflicts. Family problems are probably one of the main reasons a lot of men leave the ministry.
Yep.
Uh,
Well, before we move into retiring and then exploring the Bible, there's something that came to mind that I want to touch on because I think it's something that you did very well. And I think it's something that I see it a lot in the secular world in leadership and also in pastoral ministry. I think it's lacking. And you actually gave me a book to read one time during one of my many internships. Why You Act the Way You Act.
I don't
Now,
even have my copy anymore. I might have to get that back.
you gave me your copy.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this is your copy. So if you ever want it back, it'll give me a good reason to come see you to bring it back to
You
you. But
you can keep it till you feel need to give it to somebody else.
this, I mean, it goes without saying the biblical teaching's primary. But aside from that, this has impacted me more than anything else that you've assigned me to do. Where I want to go with this is, you've dealt with many men either going into ministry or were in ministry, or and aside from that, pastoral ministry within a congregation, you have a wide range of personalities and the way people think and react, which is a lot of what this book deals with. One of the things I've always said that I've appreciated the most about you is you never try to change me. You let me be who I am, but steered me in the right direction, knowing my personality and how I am and things like that. Do you see that as one of the hallmarks of just the leadership that a pastor needs to have in dealing with people?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of these temperament tests and things you can take, and uh, there's the disc model. There, and I don't know. I can't even remember all their names. There's one time I checked, it was like, I don't know, 20 some different, ways of looking at this, and some of them have 16 types of personalities, and some of them have, more or less. But as that book points out, is that Tim LaHaye's book?
Yep, Tim LaHaye.
Uh, as that book point, I think, does I think it covers some of the combinations in the end, but it basically focuses on the four basic personality traits. Two are kind of introverts, two are kind of extroverted. Uh, and that's about all I can keep in my mind. You talk about 16 personality traits. I can't peg you, but I can fit you into some broad category. And you have to handle people differently based on their personality. And if you pay attention to that over the years, you can pretty well, in a few minutes talking to somebody, or certainly in a few hours, have a pretty good idea of, how they relate, what they what they do, why they do it, how not so much why they do it, but what they're going to do or what they're going to say or how they're going to approach something and how you should
Yep.
approach them. Yeah, there's a lot of pastors who just don't get this. It was a great help to
Yeah.
me to learn this. Yeah.
Well, it was important for me because I grew up in an environment that was very much cookie cutter. It was, there's only this way to be. This is how you have to be. You have to look this way, dress this way. I mean, legalistic type stuff. And freedom in Christ means God made us all the way we are, and for better or worse, good or bad, all my faults included, I am wired the way I'm wired. And
Yeah.
so if you're a young pastor that's watching this and you're saying, hey, I wish I had a Pastor Jay, well, maybe the time has passed and you weren't able to have one. Maybe you can be a Pastor Jay to someone else. I would encourage you to do like what was done for me. I never felt like you were trying to mold me into who you were. You were trying to mold me into who God wanted me to be, but just using your experience to keep. I look at it as kind of like, you go to the bowling alley and they put the little guardrails in the gutter for the kids. Kind of like that. You show me where those guardrails at, and you just kept me in the center moving forward. But well, let's move into the retirement phase because there may be some older pastors who are maybe getting close to this phase that may watch this, and they may be thinking, well, what am I going to do? How will I know? Those kinds of things. So have you had time to kind of think through it? For you, was choosing to retire, did it take a long time? Did you sort of take one foot out and bring it back in? Were you hesitant? Was it something you just kind of knew when the time was right? What did that kind of look like for you?
Well, I sort of had in mind that to begin with, when I get to be 60, maybe it's time to step down. No, it wasn't 60. So then I thought, well, maybe when I'm 63. No. 65. No. So I ended up being 67 when I retired. And I don't know, nothing sacred about the date or the time or the year, your age. I was, when you get to your mid 60s, you kind of realize this, you don't have the same energy level and some of those things. And I had a lot of struggle with hearing, and I still do. Works pretty good one on one, something like this, but in a church with a bunch of people around talking, I have had trouble even communicating. So I had some, there's things like that. But mostly, I just felt that's what the Lord wanted me to do. I can't explain it. I thought it was time that I'd been there, and I'd been there long enough. And if I stayed another 10 years, it was still going to look the same. And that was my human thinking, but I felt this inner compulsion. It was time to leave, as much as felt that leading to enter into the ministry to begin with.
Yeah.
Um,
And to be clear, we're not talking about retiring from Christian life and living and serving. You're just from that full time vocational type role is what you were looking at.
yeah, I told people, I said, I'm retiring from being a full-time pastor, but I'm not retiring from the ministry.
Yeah.
And the Lord's held me to that. Uh, the 3 years I spent in Texas before moving back to North Carolina, the first 3 years, uh, really, I was lost for a while. I mean, and you second guess yourself 1,000 times. Maybe I should have stayed. This isn't working, you know.
Hmm.
This isn't what I thought it would be. And I think everybody retires and from any job probably goes through that. I think I think it's probably harder for pastors. But you've been years and years of people looking to you for comfort, for instruction, for counsel, for leadership, and then suddenly you're just one of the
Some
crowd.
guy. Yeah.
Uh, but the Lord was gracious to me, and by the time I spent my third year, or got to my third year in Texas, I was preaching 11, 12 times a year for the pastor where I was at, and I was teaching adult Sunday school classes way more than that. The Lord gave me plenty of opportunities to use my gift. So I was thankful for that. That's what I wanted. And I wrote a book in those 3 years, the book on spiritual gifts.
Mm-hmm. Gifted
And
to serve.
that required a lot of thought, a lot of research. And um, I couldn't have done that and been a pastor. I don't think, not effectively.
Yeah.
So there's
Well,
good things
I
about
mean,
it.
from my vantage point, knowing you how I know you, of course, I'm glad you came back to the promised land, North Carolina. But in a sense, I mean, I won't experientially be able to understand how you feel until I go through it. But just trying to understand it from my vantage point, it almost makes sense to me that you would go to a completely different state right after you leave 30 years of pastoral ministry, because it really gives you that separation in a sense. Because now you're back living in the same area, but you've got your, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, you've got your own thing going now that's separate from the church that you were pastoring. And I know that a lot of that is so that that new pastor, David Clower, can be there and be established and do his thing and serve. But having those years to kind of be fully separated from everything, I think it gave you that chance to just kind of breathe a little bit too, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You don't realize sometimes how, I don't know, stress is not the right word necessarily, but I don't know how else to say it. There's a certain amount of stress that goes with being a pastor that it doesn't mean you're in sin because you feel stressed. It just means you got to pray more and be more yielded to God. But so that was nice. But every part of life, just growing older gives you more stress, or something else. Uh, I ended up teaching Christian school, teaching Bible history in a Christian school for 2 years while I was out there. And you think you think the church is stressful, you might want to think about being a school teacher too. It's kind of in that same vein, but yeah, but
Okay.
it was
Well,
good for me. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was good for me. And
yeah.
coming back to North Carolina has been incredibly difficult for me because it's another transition after just 3 years, and I've been back here a year, and we're just kind of at this point, kind of getting it all sorted out, and hopefully we're not going to be moving again for the rest of my life. So,
Well, we've got one last section of discussion here before we move into our final question, but I do want to transition now to what you currently do, and that is exploring the Bible with it. The full title. Do y'all call it Exploring the Bible Ministries? What's the official title?
yeah, we're a nonprofit corporation in the state of North Carolina, and that corporation is Exploring the Bible Ministries. Uh,
Okay.
I do a Tuesday night Bible lesson at a local Christian mission board that focuses on Jewish missions called Jewish Awareness Missions in Angier, North Carolina. They give us a place to stay and or a place to use to teach. and been very much a blessing to us. And I just teach a Bible lesson every Tuesday night, and for whoever wants to come. And I'm not far from the church I pastored for 30 years, so there's a good number of people. Not a good number of people, but a good portion of the people come know me, and they come occasionally. Some come more regular than others, and but we've ministered to people in the last year that have come from 14 different churches in the area, and we get a lot of people coming in that are unchurched, and we've been able to insist to encourage and assist them in finding a church. So I see our ministry as supporting the local churches in the area, not trying to compete with them. So we don't have a meeting on Sunday morning or Sunday evening or even Wednesday evening. We just do something separate. At the same
Yeah.
time, I also
Well,
have 5 or 6 pastors that I try to minister to personally and encourage, and I get invited to preach in churches around here too. So I'm way busier right now than I ever envisioned that I would be doing this. But
well, that's good. I know we've got you got the website explorethebible.us, and you have a YouTube channel. So many people now, when we talk about sermon audio, there is a way to watch sermon audio on your TV. I think it typically will require you to have a Roku box or something along that fashion. But a YouTube app is pretty much universal. If you have a smart TV, you should have access, especially LG and all these different brands have access to YouTube, so you can watch it there. But Sermon Audio is one that you've been on. And if I remember correctly, it was somewhere around May of 2017 that you started with them. And there's a little bit of a steeper pricing point for them, but for what you get, it is worth every penny. You're going worldwide. There are people in countries that may not have an opportunity to hear Bible preaching that can because of it. And so you've been able to be on there. I know somewhere around 2016, I started getting interested in this world of online ministry. And I remember we had someone that was doing the church website at the time that was leaving. And I said, look, before you go off and spend $3,000 or $5,000, let me try. The worst that could happen is you have to say, son, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing in life, and we'll be okay. But I think it turned out okay. And then from there, I got into video editing and stuff, and I've had the joy to be able to work on your content. We're coming up on a decade now, and it's one of the great joys of my life. And talk to me about, because I know, and this is one of the reasons I want to talk to you, having come from a world where this type of technology didn't even exist when you were younger. Were there hesitations for you as we started to get into this that you thought, should I really be doing this? Or did you fully embrace it from the get go?
I didn't embrace it immediately. I had my daughter and one of my deacons, and probably you were involved in that mix too in the beginning, saying, we got a live stream. And I kept saying, who's going to watch it? You know, people don't know me. I'm just a pastor out here in the country. Uh, but I, at some point, realized this is where things are going, and this is an opportunity to reach more people than you can otherwise. And I'm thrilled to death. I'm still doing it, and thanks to you, Andy. Andy takes care of my website completely. I don't know what I'm doing on the website. I can punch a button and watch some video on there, but that's about it. Uh, so if any of you pastors need somebody to help you with a website or with internet broadcasting, sermon audio, talk to Andy about that. Um, he kept my stuff going all the time. I've been retired, and now I'm finally putting in regular content again. And I think so far this year, our videos that we do on our Tuesday night lesson have been viewed in like 80 different countries around the world.
Yep.
And 41 states.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I haven't checked lately, but for a long time, the number 2 country in the world to watch our videos uh, after the United States was China. So, you go places that
Yeah.
you couldn't go even if you wanted to.
And
And
from what I understand too, now YouTube has the ability to actually track if someone stays with a video to the end. I don't know if Sermon Audio does that, but I do know that each one of those numbers, at a bare minimum, they're clicking on your video or starting it. So our hope is always that they will, at least the possibility is there that they listen to the whole sermon. I think there is some plans in place to get something like YouTube where you can track the retention as well. But just to have people in 80 countries click on a sermon tells you that it's getting out there.
yeah, uh, but if it wasn't what you do, Andy, that wouldn't be possible. And when we started doing this Tuesday night thing, exploring the Bible, that was a major purpose, was to continue and to put more content on Sermon Audio and make it available worldwide. And then, minister to local people who want to come as well, and to local churches in the area. But uh, it's amazing to think that we could do this thing on Tuesday night, and it's videoed and it's available around the world.
Yep.
And I'll give the pastors another name here. Robbie Ray takes care of our IT on this end, the streaming and the videos and everything. And Robbie's been a great friend for many years. And if you need someone to give you some help on how to get that all going, get in touch with Andy. He's got Robbie, and probably a lot of other people can help you with any of this stuff.
Yeah, when it comes to hardware, like what type of cords you need, the type of equipment you need, how to make it all work, that's Robbie Ray's area. I'm very good with the software side of things, your websites, your video editing, and things like that. And I've always said, and you do this correctly. Some out there don't, but I think you do it well, and I try to do this well. Online ministry is not a replacement for the local church. It's an enhancement to the local church. I still have a local church I'm involved with. Every pastor should, whether you're currently pastoring or not. But I have a list of really good teachers that don't even come close to living within driving distance of me that I'm able to learn from on a weekly basis because of the internet. So, with all its faults, with all the things you hear out there about what can go wrong online, there's a lot of good that can come from it as well. And I'm glad you've been able to benefit it, because I've told you from day one, in my mind, it's about legacy. You know, everybody has a deferring eschatological viewpoint about, is Jesus coming soon? Is it 100 years in the future? Whatever. Regardless, we're supposed to labor as if it's going to be 500 years, 1,000 years, so on and so forth. Well, if that's the case, we're going to have great grandchildren and great great grandchildren. And I want them to be able to hear their great great grandfather or great grandfather, or even in the case with Pearson and your granddaughter, Verity.
And I'm very aware of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think about that because, I'm not going to be on this earth too many more years. And my grandkids can listen and watch the sermons I preach the rest of their life, and
They
other
can
people
see
as well.
you, hear you. Absolutely. Well, let's shift into closing mode here. Um, Final kind of question to put towards you here. You're not done yet, and we talk about finishing well. The Lord may give you however many years He gives you is His prerogative. He's obviously still using you. He's still using you in my life as well. As you look to the future of what you're going to accomplish and just the future of pastoral ministry, what are you most hopeful about when you see younger pastors like myself and others that are sort of coming up behind you, so to speak? What are some of the things that you see that make you very hopeful?
I don't know about specifics so much, but I'm just encouraged at my age and from my perspective, just to see God puts His hand on people in every generation, and sometimes we look at the younger generations, we think, "What's this world coming to?" But someone looked at us and said the same thing. Uh, so it's just more encouraging to me to see people go into the ministry, to see people desirous of being in the pastoral ministry, or just being a Sunday school teacher, or being in the music ministry, whatever. I know what that involves. I know the sacrifices you make and the commitment it takes, and to see people doing that in this current generation is greatly encouraging to me.
Amen. Well, I know I can say from my vantage point that, and obviously it goes without saying, it's all glory to God. It's all him. That's just assumed here. But if there's no Pastor Jay, there's no Pastor Andy. That's just that simple. You were the right person at the right time who got me at my most immature, and you've been able to see me grow and evolve into where I'm at now. And I know that 15, 20 years from now, I'll look a lot different then too. And I look forward to the day when I can be for someone what you've been for me. And for me, loyalty is a big thing. And, like I've told you, there's nothing I wouldn't do for you in appreciation. And I think, or at least I'm hopeful as far as from my vantage point, that one of the things that has been an encouragement for you is to be able to see people like me come along and know that you had a direct impact on people like me.
Well, and to see someone like yourself come along is having an impact on my ministry now. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't be doing what I'm doing with the online stuff without you. So it comes back when you help somebody around you, help them get involved in ministry, encourage them, whatever you do, you're going to benefit from that yourself.
Yep.
And that's a real blessing to see that happen.
Yep. Well, the one thing you've instilled in me more than anything else is to strip everything else away. The consistent, faithful, week in, week out preaching, teaching of the Word of God. That is what is primary. And I know many pastors that are my age out there, and there's a lot of really good pastors out there that are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that are coming behind you that believe the same way. And so I think, there's a lot of negative in our world, but I really am positive about the state of pastoral ministry. I think it's doing very well. I think we have some areas to improve, but I think because of people like yourself and others like you that have instilled in us, we need to take what you have left us and build on it, and then leave it for the next generation behind us. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really hope that anyone that watches this will see that not only these types of relationships not only can exist, but hopefully you're able to see through what I've said and what Jay has said, that there is a lasting legacy to be had there. So identify these people in your life. It doesn't have to be a pastoral relationship. You can disciple people around the bed of a pickup. You can disciple people in so many ways. And we need to be mentoring people. We need to be discipling people. The world's going to throw a lot of negative at you. There's a lot of positive in this world. And there's a lot of good things happening in this world. And that's one of the reasons I want to do these God-centered conversations for people like you that are watching this, to hear the story of a Pastor Jay. You see how it's affecting a Pastor Andy. And then for you to find those types of relationships in your life, because we need each other. We were commanded by our Lord Jesus to love one another. And that's how the world's going to know that we're his disciples. We need to start doing this better. I need to start doing this better. And I just hope you've enjoyed this tonight. So thank you, Pastor Jay. And remember, this is the place for consistent God-centered, God-honoring, and God-glorifying biblical content. Everything that we have and everything that we are is by the grace of God. God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you, Andy.